What is up, guys? Dzeeff here, and today I wanted to talk about my opinion on some of the better decks for newer or returning competitive players. I think a lot of people picked up Yu-Gi-Oh! Over the last couple of years here, and locals are opening back up, and we just got a new YCS announcement that was very exciting, so people are getting excited to try out Yu-Gi-Oh! Once again. If you're someone who is new to the game, or someone that quit the game a while ago and is now trying to get back into it, these decks in today's video are going to be great options. Now, when I'm thinking of good decks for returning players, I'm thinking of decks that have a low entry cost but can be expanded upon in the future if you decide to invest more into the game. These aren't really meta calls necessarily, but I do think they can all get wins at the moment, but I am trying to keep this video relevant for as long as possible. So I'm picking decks that have proven themselves in the past and decks that I think will be good for a long time even after I make this video. Before going into the good choices, I will give one word of warning here. I think that the nostalgia bait decks are usually not good investments for newer or returning competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Players. We're talking about things like Dark Magician or Blue Eyes or Red Eyes or Toons. While it's your own money and you are allowed to do whatever you want with it, I will say here that on average those types of decks cost way more than what they're worth in terms of competitive success. You can spend a lot less on any of the decks that I mention in today's video, and you'll probably do better at local tournaments than if you bought things like Dark Magician or Toons. Anyway, let's talk about 5 decks that I feel are good options for returning or newer competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Players. If you guys are inspired to buy any decks or cards after watching today's video, please use my link to tcgplayer.com. It'll be in the description below. The first strategy I'll mention is Gran Maju. I feel like every locals has at least one Gran Maju player, and I think that's for a reason. Gran Maju can steal wins against basically any meta deck. It has a ton of tools against rogue decks. Gran Maju is a fantastic budget option for a lot of players. You can build it in a few different ways, but some popular cards are the danger monsters. Those are big. Obviously, you have key cards like Pot of Desires to not only dig for power cards, but also to power up your Eater of Millions or Gran Maju. I think this deck is a perfect option for a lot of players because it actually can win against most decks. I mean, you can just OTK people out of nowhere. Gran Maju is a very low investment deck. There isn't a ton of room to grow after you've made that initial investment, but if you are looking for a cheaper deck to get a few wins with, this is a great option for you. One thing that I think really is appealing about Gran Maju, especially to returning players, is that you don't really have to worry about extra deck mechanics that much when you play Gran Maju. Oftentimes you are simply banishing all of your extra deck cards for Eater of Millions anyway, but even if you're not, I mean, you probably have to know how to fusion summon if you're using super polymerization, and you might play a couple rank 8 monsters, but other than that, oftentimes your wins are just using main deck monsters only. Next up, we have Shaddolls, and I wish this was a few years ago where I could tell you guys, oh, just go to Meijer or Target or your locals and pick up 3 copies of the Shaddoll Showdown structure deck, but finding that thing sealed these days is pretty much impossible. It's that popular. That being said, you can go online and buy the singles from that structure deck, and it's still a relatively cheap investment. What I like about this deck is that even if you only are working with cards from the structure deck, you can make a pretty competent competitive deck that will beat a lot of the combo players at your locals. El Shaddoll Winda is a very crazy card, and you don't need that much in addition to Winda against some matchups. Now, there are a lot of good cards you can add to your deck once you feel like investing more into your strategy. For example, you can add the Invoked engine. That's been a staple in Shaddolls for years now, but you can also add the Dogmatica engine too. Things like Nadir Servant combo quite nicely with the Shaddolls that you'll already own. If you're someone that thinks they'll be able to invest more money into the game in the coming months, I think Shaddolls are probably one of the best choices for you because the deck is definitely playable when you only have the cheaper cards, but when you can slowly add those expensive cards, it will get exponentially better. Even if you don't think you'll be able to invest more into Shaddoll Shaddolls in the future. Shaddolls are still a great starting deck. El Shaddoll Winda is a fantastic floodgate monster, and you have a variety of ways to deal with a bunch of matchups using the regular Shaddoll effects. So don't worry if you don't think you'll be able to afford the invoked cards or the Dogmatica cards someday. Even if you can't get to those, the baseline Shaddoll cards are still pretty darn good, even in 2021. Next up, we have Salamand, and just like with Shaddolls, while this archetype does have a very good structure deck, you probably won't be able to find it in 2021. That being said, the singles are fairly inexpensive, and you should be able to build Salamand for not that big of a cost. There are areas where you can improve your deck if you want to invest more, like Access Code Talker someday, but even if you don't own Access Code Talker, you can build the baseline Salamand deck for not that big of an investment. And that's great because Salamand have pretty much always been good since they were released. Even when Mirage Stalio was banned, the deck was alright, but now that Stalio is back because it was unbanned a few ban lists ago, the deck is better than ever. It has a ton of options, and you can improve upon it in the future. What's cool about Salamand is that there's lots of ways to build this deck. You can build it more aggressively if you just want to OTK, or you can build it more like a control deck. Salamand have tons of options, and I think that makes it a really great choice for returning players. Next up, we have zombies, and I know I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but while the basic zombie deck does pretty much just use what's in the structure deck Zombie Horde, you probably can't find structure deck Zombie Horde at stores anymore. And I know it sounds silly that I keep mentioning this, but I think it really does go to show that Konami knows how to make a great structure deck, and when these were released, a lot of people played them at my locals. I can remember back when Salamand were released in that Soulburner structure deck, everybody was playing Salamand at locals for like the next 3 months. It was a big deal. Anyway, zombies. Zombie World is a fantastic field spell that floodgates a lot of decks while also making your own cards stronger. I love Zombie World. It's been a great choice as a side deck option for years in decks that don't even necessarily play zombies, but also it's great in actual zombie decks. Doom King is still an incredible boss monster all these years later, and like the best budget decks out there, zombies have a number of ways that you can improve upon them if you want to invest more in the future. You can buy better extra deck cards, you could buy more hand traps, you could buy all sorts of great cards for your zombie deck. But if you can't afford those cards, you'll still get a number of wins just through Zombie World and Doom King. And I think that is really great. I think zombies are super versatile, and we have like vampire support releasing sometime in the future here that will make zombies a bit better as well. So I think zombies have a ton of potential as a good rogue option, even outside of being a budget deck, but they're also a great budget option for returning or newer competitive players. And finally, I am happy to announce that Altergeists are a good returning player option. This is a deck that I haven't really been able to include in these types of discussions in the past because you had expensive cards like Pot of Extravagance and Infinite Impermanence. With the recent Infinite Impermanence reprint though in the Cyber Strike structure deck, Altergeists are a lot more budget friendly. You do not need Pot of Extravagance to play this deck. Obviously the card is very good, and if you can buy it in the future, that would really help out. But even if you don't own Pot of Extravagance, you can still play Pot of Duality or just play more trap cards. I think Altergeists are one of the most fun decks in the entire game. I know people in the comment section will probably cringe when I say that, but if you like controlling the game, if you like using trap cards, Altergeists are a great option for you. And now that we have that Infinite Impermanence reprint that's a lot less expensive than some of the earlier Infinite Impermanence reprints we've gotten over the years, I think the deck is more budget friendly now than it ever has been. I'm obviously a huge fan of Altergeists. I've taken them to a ton of bigger tournaments, but also even if you're only playing at locals, they are a pretty great choice. Anyway, that is all for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comment section below. Did I miss any decks that you guys really enjoy? What are some good budget options out there for returning or newer competitive players? I'd love to hear what ideas you guys have. I'll see you later though. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.